So here we are with the Mini Electric. So Mini are currently offering 24-hour test drives, so I've taken them up on that offer. This is my first foray with this generation of Mini, and it's also the first electric vehicle that I've driven, so it's quite exciting. I think I'm going to do this review slightly differently to some of my others. I'm going to do it as a bit of a journal almost, so a voyage of discovery. So we've just been and picked this up. I don't know a tremendous amount about the electric Mini, or even this generation of Mini, apart from a quick look on the website. Styling wise, I think the electric looks very much like the petrol counterparts. I don't mind how they look. Not as pretty as the first generation BMW Mini. I think each one's sort of got a little bit uglier, but it still looks pretty good, to be honest. Boring colours. I know it's got nice coloured door mirrors, but silvers, greys, whites and blacks aren't really my sort of colours. I'd prefer something like yellow, orange, vivid blue. I believe there are some nicer colours for me in the option list, but I think the oranges and the yellows aren't available. This particular one seems to be equipped with the most hideous alloy wheels I've ever witnessed. Thankfully, I believe there are options on those. But first impressions are pretty positive. I mean, just in general for this vehicle, the fit and finish quality in here is gorgeous. It really is. I've been in a Mercedes A-Class, and I'll be honest, this knocks the socks off of those in terms of sort of tactile feel. The seats were instantly comfortable. Steering wheel, I don't know, it's a bit chunky here. I quite like to drive at the sort of 3/4handhold rather than the 10-2. It feels nice, but it's a bit fat, just to hold around there. It'd be nice just to slightly different profile. Got plenty of screens, but it's actually really nice. I quite like the styling of it. I think for the price point, it's actually a very well attired car and does feel really solid. Obviously it's a 3-door. I don't know if there's a convertible or a 4-door model in the works. I think personally, for me, the convertible would probably appeal. Small boot, got an array of charging cables, which I think is perhaps one of the downsides of electric cars, that you've got to carry all this paraphernalia around with you. But yeah, first impressions. Need to get myself a bit more acclimatised, I think, to the driving position. Get myself just comfy in the car. I find the gap between the wheel and the seats perhaps a bit small where I have it, but I'm not very tall. It is quite comfy. Rearward visibility is pretty horrendous, but I think that's just the styling of the car that does that. In here, I think just literally put your foot on the brake, start her up. You get some weird sort of Star Warsy type sounds. I've had a little look through the menu systems. I think everything is sort of customizable, but we've got quite a nice LCD binnacle here. We've got one in the centre. No massive sort of 8-inch iPad screens in here, but I don't think it really needs it. All the switchgear seems pretty good. We've got a conventional sort of automatic shifter, which I don't know, I think it must be built for left-hand drive, because it's got like a button on that side there, which just feels a bit uncomfortable. It probably wants, I don't know, you don't have to interface with it very much, which is good, but it's not the most comfortable gear selector I've come across. But literally you just push the side button in and you've got drive, or you've got neutral, or we've got reverse, sorry, and then you've got neutral, and then we've got a manually operated electric handbrake, which I kind of thought would all be automatic with the gear selector actually, but maybe not. And a park mode as well. which again doesn't automatically apply the handbrake, or at least it doesn't seem to. But I think that's all sort of by the by. You kind of get used to these things. Got the rear view camera on, even though we're in park now. Not quite sure how I've done that, but I think this is just modern cars for you though. You kind of need to spend a week with them, reading through the instruction manual and figuring out all the little tricks and offerings they've got. But yeah, it's quite nice in here. I think getting to the driving, we'll get some video of that in a bit. I could quite like electric cars, I think. I don't believe they're the future. I think the infrastructure's just not there for it. But I do believe electric drive is probably the future, even if that's backed up by some kind of internal combustion generator to produce onboard electricity. And it's quite nice. It's a bit weird, sort of below 15, maybe 20 mile an hour. It's noisier than you'd think. It's a little bit whirry. You can kind of hear that. And then once you get up to speed, you don't really hear anything from the motor, although it does make it very profound about the wind noise. So it's probably an area manufacturers need to concentrate on more, is trying to cut down the wind noise, because you do kind of really notice it. Although many modern petrol and diesel cars are pretty silent. You don't really hear the engine at sort of 40 mile an hour and above. But yeah, it's a bit strange. It's got a bit of a whir. And definitely when you're in reverse, you really hear that as well. But I have to say, I quite like how it goes. It's it feels punchy, you know, like a big sort of traditional V8 would feel. In, you know, you just put your foot down and it goes. It makes the steering wheel sort of squirm and the car squirm about a bit. I assume that's you know, I'm not quite sure what type of differential it has in here, or traction control. But definitely you can feel the power being deployed, and it's really sort of punchy and pokey. I don't believe this car is the quickest in the world. I think it's meant to be sort of 185 horsepower or something, you know, in sort of 7-ish seconds, 7.5 seconds to 60. But it's kind of instant. I think the downside for that is it's, even in the short drive, you know, I've only done, I don't know, less than 10 miles so far in it. It's kind of fun in a novelty fashion. The fact you can just squeeze the throttle and it goes, very much sort of point and squirt. It's not overly involving, and I don't know how dynamic the fun would be once you sort of get past, oh yes, it's quite pokey, because there's plenty of pokey petrol engines out there as well. But it kind of just goes where you want. You're not really doing a lot. So from a, you know, an ultimate driving point of view, I don't know, a bit of a question mark there. I think we'll come back to that and see what my thoughts are later on in the day. But yeah, so far quite impressed. It definitely feels really punchy, you know, sort of 20 to 50 mile an hour. I think once you get up to sort of motorway speeds, definitely the power seems to have tailed off. And while it's probably still quick, it doesn't give you that instant sort of jolt that it does low down. And I dare say that's where perhaps the petrol cars are probably still superior to some of the electrics, unless you're going to put gearing in with the electrics as well. But we'll get this out on the road. We'll do a few more miles. We'll do a bit more of a journal log and see what we're thinking. Okay, so I've done a couple more miles in the electric Mini. Just a few more thoughts. It's really smooth, really tractable at low speed, which is quite surprising. So sort of, you know, manoeuvring, parking, you know, when you're doing 1 or 2 mile an hour. I'm quite impressed. It's a lot smoother than I thought. General driving is silky smooth. It really is. And a really nice thing is it sits at speed really well. So I'm sort of doing 30-ish mile an hour. We're in a 40 limit, but it will sit there quite happily. And in fact, the road's quiet. I think it will sit at 20 quite happily as well. Now, that's kind of important, I think, on modern roads where you have lots of speed restrictions. Lots of cars struggle to sit at particular speeds, or a bit misgeared. But I'm quite impressed with this. I think my only reservation so far is I haven't even got home from the dealership yet. It says we're down to 88% battery from 100% full, and I haven't driven it really hard. You know, I think maybe this is still the undoing of electric cars for the masses. Is, you know, how much range you've got versus the charge time. But we'll see. We'll see. Another thing I wanted just to pick up on is the regenerative braking. So we've got this nice little dial here. You can see, put your foot down, and it shows how much power you're using. And if you come off, it goes into Regen Braking. And that's really quite aggressive. Something you have to sort of get used to. It kind of feels like you're, I don't know, driving in deep sand. Anybody who does off-roading and familiar with engine braking, but it does mean you kind of need a bit of a trailing throttle coming up to junctions, else you'll end up stopping or reducing speed far quicker than you perhaps thought you would. But it's quite nice. I think it's something you will get used to, so I've got no real problems with that. The car itself, it rides really well. I'm quite surprised. Very quiet and comfy in here. It's not crashing and banging over the bumps. I've driven other small modern cars which do, so yeah, quite impressed there that it's quite pleasant in here. Right, we'll do another update in a bit. So here we are out on the road in the Mini Electric. I've already sort of commented on some of my thoughts so far. I think we'll just reiterate some of those as we take it for a little bit of a test drive. The car itself, I have to say, I'm really impressed. It's nice in here. There's nothing that I've hated, which is kind of rare. It all feels really high quality in here and well screwed together. I know it's a new car, but there's no creaks or rattles that I can detect. Everything feels really quite comfy. It's a bit dark in here. I'm not so keen on the black headlining, but I know there are some other trim options you can get. Although the grey seats look quite nice, sort of leather with a cloth insert. So yeah, it's nice in here. I'm really impressed. I think the cheapest thing is these sun visors feel a bit, I don't know, Fisher Price, but that's really nitpicking. As I said, the actual driving position is pretty good. You do feel very low down and very much like slit-like windows. I can just see the top of the bonnet, but I've got no idea where it really is. And rear visibility, I don't know, it's just a bit rubbish really. But I think that's just the nature of the design of modern cars. The steering wheel, again, feels really nice. I still feel it's a bit chunky just where I want to hold it here. Not the most comfortable of wheels, but it feels quite nice, the quality, and it does the job. And there's no rough stitching. I find a lot of cars have got stitching on the back of the wheel. This one hasn't. So to the electric side of things, well, it's pretty silent. I don't know if you can hear it whirring when we're at low speed. There is just a little bit of a whir, especially when you're sort of coasting at 5 miles an hour. And then it sort of disappears about there, about 20 miles an hour, 18, 20 miles an hour, and you can't really hear it anymore. And it's ever so smooth. Very impressed with that. I think anybody who's looking for a comfortable car, this is certainly going to be that kind of niche that you want. I'm sure all the electric cars are going to be very similar in how they put the power down. So we're just gently accelerating, coming up to some 60 miles an hour now in this 70 zone. You know, and it will sit there quite happily. There's a little bit of rumble going on, I dare say it's the tyres, and a little bit of wind noise, which you're going to get in the petrol ones. Let's face it, that's not a function of being electric. But overall, I think the Mini rides really well. I remember driving the A-Class a couple of years ago, fairly low profile tyres I've got to this one. So in terms of the electric side of things, we've got a little display here that says we're doing 3 miles per kilowatt. I don't really know what that means. I don't know how many kilowatts we have. Nothing really tells me that on the screen that I can see. Average speed, and I assume that's a trip, 724 miles, certainly not a range, and the amount of time it's been driven. The binnacle in front of me has the fuel gauge, as it were. So we're currently at 81%, which is quite alarming because I know we've only done about 15 miles from 100%, fully charged. But I don't really know what 81% means. There's nothing in here that's given me an indication of range. I dare say if you knew how many kilowatts you had, you could do a bit of maths, mental arithmetic, and work out that you're 3 miles per kilowatt, kilowatt hour, sorry, and give you an idea of how far you can drive. But I kind of feel a bit blind. I mean, range indicators have been quite the norm on, petrol and diesel cars for 20 years now. But in here it doesn't really tell me how far I can drive. I mean, we're sort of 50 miles north of London. It would be nice to know, could I drive to North Wales without having to stop and charge up? I've got no idea. I just really don't know. Or are we limiting it to, maybe I could get to Northampton or something. But apart from that, I'm really quite impressed with this. We've got a little button down here that says Sport or Green. Seems like we've got 4 different modes. We've got Green Plus, which I assume is the most economical mode. I don't quite know what it's doing. I assume it limits the amount of actual power you can put down. I think I saw somewhere it's at 92% rather than 100% power. And whether the Regen Braking is a bit more aggressive. Driving in the Green Plus mode at sort of 50 mile an hour on a trailing throttle, it kind of feels like you're driving into a very strong headwind. It feels like you have to keep prodding the throttle a little bit just to keep it going, because it feels like, if you flex your big toe a little bit, it feels like it wants to instantly slow up a lot. The green mode, I assume, is just slightly less so, and I assume mid is what they mean for sort of normal driving. Although personally, in the short journeys I've done so far, I think the sport mode is probably the nicest. I don't know if it does anything to the steering and suspension as well. Obviously we've got no gearbox per se, but the throttle definitely feels a bit more responsive. And I think if you're going to have a car that is potentially pokey and fun to drive, I don't know why you wouldn't use this mode all the time. If you're just trying to eke out the maximum miles per kilowatt hour, then probably you'd go for something that isn't quite as performance orientated. I wouldn't say this is a sports car, it certainly isn't, but sort of cracking 60 in 7 seconds isn't a slouch either. There must be a compromise where you could have an electric car that's more like 10 to 12 seconds, 0 to 60, and far less battery hungry as a result. In terms of driving, I know the Mini isn't a super small car. Some still lament the days from the the Austin or the British Leyland Mini. But it's not a big car either. Although it's quite spacious in here. The car does feel quite beefy to drive. I think you get that with a lot of modern cars. There's no real body roll. The steering is smooth if slightly detached, and it just feels like it will go anywhere. But it doesn't exactly feel like the small, nimble hot hatch of yesteryear. It does feel like quite a beefy, sort of almost GT style car, which probably isn't a bad way of looking at it. In terms of the power, so we're just coming off the roundabout there, if I put my foot down, it's instant. Throws you in the back of the seat. I quite like that. You haven't got to drive it like that all the time. You can just roll onto the throttle and it'll just gradually pick up some speed, which is nice. it's not a fire-breathing monster by any means, but it is certainly very perky. You know, we're in a national speed limit zone here, so I'm doing 44 miles an hour. And if I decide to floor it, it just goes through 60. It is a bit odd. You can feel the car wanting to pull left and right on the road. It kind of squirms a little bit. I wouldn't say you feel it loads through the steering wheel, but definitely in the chassis movement you can feel the car just wants to move side to side under power, which I suppose is a testament to how much torque the electric motor is actually making. I do kind of wonder if you're on a slippery surface, you know, if this was sort of 6 o'clock in the morning and you've got a nice white crisp frost on here, or if you've got a little bit of snow. I think while it is really smooth and progressive, you'd have to be disciplined with the throttle. I can see people perhaps getting themselves into trouble. You know, it's just so easy just to plant it and go. At the minute we've got loads of traction, so it's not a problem. But I think on low traction surfaces, it might give the older traction control a pretty good workout to see what it can do. You can turn the traction control off. I'm not entirely sure how it works. There's another button here. If I push it, it tells me something about traction control with the warning light off, although saying it's dynamic traction activated. I'm not quite sure what that is. I don't really know the difference between it on and off, to be honest. And I think if you perhaps hold it, maybe it does something else. I don't know. It's probably one to sit and either Google or look through the manual. I don't think it really matters for this test drive though. I have tried sort of brake torquing it off the start. You can't do that. It's sort of, you know, it's one pedal at a time. Although when you're driving, you can left foot brake. Although, to be honest, the pedal's a little bit offset to the right flat. You haven't got like a big brake pedal like you would with some automatic petrol cars. So if you want to drive it go-kart style, the pedal layout isn't really ideal, but it is possible. We're out of this junction, so wide open throttle. It just takes a moment to think about it and then it's off. It squirms a bit, and we're at the legal limit. But it seems to eat up roads like this, absolutely no trouble. It really is a very nice car. Surprisingly so. I knew it was probably going to be good. Although the price point isn't that high. I think these start at 26 grand. Obviously you've got an options list on that as well. So what, 26 grand? It's just slightly more than the Fiesta ST. I'm sure the Fiesta's a lot more fun and a bit more perky, probably especially up top. But actually as a sort of a commuter car, I think this is probably very nice. You've got enough performance that you can have a little bit of fun, and it seems to go on corner well enough. It just feels like a bit of a bigger, heavier car, but sort of digs in, put your foot down, you know, and if you want to remain legal, you're going to be hitting that speed limit pretty quickly and safely. So we're still on 3 miles per kilowatt hour. I think we've not done a huge number of miles since I set off, maybe 7, but we're now down to 76% battery. You do kind of feel that it's just dipping very quickly. I'm sure if we were in a Cooper S, you wouldn't be watching the fuel gauge for the short journeys we've done. And as you can see, I'm putting my foot down occasionally, but you know, actually we're driving quite sedately overall. So the Regen braking there, haven't had to use the brake pedal at all, and that slides down well below the speed limit there. Definitely something that you need to get used to, the regenerative braking, but it's pretty good actually. I quite like it. I think it's something I would like to get used to, if I'm being honest. But if you're used to sort of petrol engines, especially vehicles that I don't know, perhaps coast very well, a lot of inertia in the flywheel, it will take a little bit of just getting used to. again, a little bit of a word as she sort of come up to a junction and pull away. Sort of seems to be slow speed that the motors are the noisiest, but I think you kind of get used to it, but it does make you think milk float. You know, especially if you were living in the UK, you know, sort of 20 or 30 years ago in the villages where you did get a lot of electric milk floats and you'd hear them in the early morning. It is quite reminiscent of that sound. But again, you know, up at 30, 40 mile an hour, and it's just, it's a non-issue. You just don't hear that at all. Right, so this is quite a nice little road here. We've got a few dips and undulations, and we've got a good set of S-bends coming up, so we'll drive them in a semi-sported manner. So we're doing 60, which is as fast as we can legally go down here. So we'll see what the bends are like when we get there. Quite an easy car to place on the road. I assume the ultimate limit of traction will be induced understeer. We'll try not to do that on the road. We're going to come into the corner, hang out a little bit wide. The Regen Braking's working. Just feed her in. Oh, throttle. That's quite impressive. We've somehow turned the stereo on while cornering. I'm not entirely sure how that's supposed to happen. So the throttle's just a little twitchy there. As you went to turn in, sort of on the trailing throttle, you're trying to balance that point between regenerative braking and still making forward progression, and squeezing the throttle did result in it feeling a little bit jerky through there. I dare say it's something you just get used to. I mean, some petrol engines and gearboxes can be quite responsive, but it's just a slight difference perhaps from a normal petrol car. You do kind of feel though that when you are putting your foot down that it kind of wants to go quicker than the speed limits. So I think you've got to be quite a disciplined person not to be exceeding them when you shouldn't be. Now, I'm not sure this is the kind of car that you're really going to be experimenting with lift-off oversteer. You know, and modern electronic handbrakes preclude the ability to do any sort of handbrake turns and hooliganism, which is probably okay for many, and certainly in a new commuter car, that's not the kind of things you'll be doing. But as a bit of a weekend warrior, you know, or as these get older, if you're thinking about doing some sort of auto testing or competition in cars like this, then obviously it does kind of limit some of their ultimate capabilities. Again, floor it, bit of a squirm, the wheels moving about, and we're at 60. Yeah. I don't know if that novelty would wear off. I think any motoring enthusiast kind of likes a pokey car. I know there is that sort of point where cars become too quick for the road, and sometimes just the simple joy of an open top sports car, you know, even something from sort of 1960s can actually be very, very rewarding, even if it is slow. But I think the performance level of this is quite usable on the road to that extent. Pulling out of junctions, you can just whip up to that speed limit quite quickly and easily, and at the moment it feels quite addictive. I kind of feel if I had a car like this I would be doing it too often. So that was kind of heavy throttle coming out of that T-junction there. Now I don't know if the traction control was intervening, whether it's just a little bit lazy, applying the power as you come out of from a standstill. Likewise, I don't know if this car has a launch control mode. I would have to Google that. But certainly when I've put my foot down before, in fact let's just pull over and we'll say, you can't really brake torque it. If I put my foot on the brake pedal, I can apply the throttle and it sort of does nothing. But whether there really is a launch control there or not, so all I'll do is I'll just use my right foot rather than left foot, and I'll just go from the brake to the throttle. So the road's clear, and we'll go on 3. 1, 2, 3, and it sort of then goes. Now we're really moving, and we're at 60, or just under. So yeah, it's got that sort of hesitant delay. You know, there was no hint of wheel spin or the traction control kicking in, whereas you kind of feel with a petrol car, you would, especially if you've got a manual gearbox on it, you could definitely induce a bit of wheel spin there. Right, we're back to these bends here, let's feed it through them, see how it goes. Let have a brake on there, grips goes. Right, now we're at 60. And it's very competent, very capable. I think anybody who drives modern cars would probably say that about lots of them. I'm pretty sure if you get into the 1 Series BMW, any of the modern sort of Fords and Mazdas, they're all kind of competent, capable cars with lots and lots of traction. You know, if you wanted something a bit more dynamic in the handling front, you know, you kind of need to look at more specialist cars. You know, you've got things like the MX-5. You know, the GT86, which I believe is no longer available here now new. But there are certainly modern cars that do offer the driving dynamics that you may be looking for. Else you need to go back to an older car. So again, that's just regenerative braking there, and we're down below the speed limit. It really is a bit like applying the brake pedal. Obviously, you should be getting a bit of battery charge back. We're now down to 71% battery though. Kind of do feel that you do have to watch the battery meter, and I suppose it's good that it's in your face. It's just here on the right hand side of the binnacle, but I think because it's there, it is in your face, and maybe you do end up sort of being glued to it. So again, I'm amazed at how tractable this is. In fact, it's quite happily sitting at 25 mile an hour in this 30 limit. Obviously we could run through here at 30, but there's no real need at the moment. But given the performance of it, it's nice that it will just sit at these speeds and it doesn't feel like it's wanting to race away. Even in the sports mode, I'm sure if you got it in the middle, the green mode, with a slightly less sensitive throttle pedal, it would be even better. But the fact it drives so well in the sport mode, I don't really see the need that you'd want to use the others. Oh, look at that, full regen braking there. Didn't use the brake pedal at all to come to a standstill. Indicators are a bit weird in this. I mean, it must be a trait of all the mini models. I find it's quite easy to put them on and they don't stay on, and then at other times they kind of stay on when you would expect them to turn off. I assume it depends on how hard you push the lever, but I haven't quite managed to figure it out yet. Like there, it's kind of stuck on. That's a bit wary just coming through the village here. So we're just on and off the throttle a little bit as we're going around the parked cars. I think what's noticeable about it is it's not a very pleasant sound. Often you will hear, you know, the petrol or the diesel engine, but they often aren't unpleasant things to hear. Whereas sort of the whir of an electric motor, at least in this instance, it's just not it's not unpleasant. But I think if you could hear it all the time, it would probably grate on you a little bit. You know, so I don't know, maybe that's a consideration if you're thinking of one of these for a city car in stop-start city traffic. I think that's got the potential to annoy. It'd certainly annoy me. I think if you're going to be doing longer commutes and out for country roads or motorways, it is a non-issue. You know, maybe I'm just being picky as well, because it is quite quiet in here. Although to be fair, lots of cars are quite quiet. My own car is a Suzuki Jimny, you know, and even though I've got that on all-terrain tyres and it's a petrol engine, you know, at 30 mile an hour, that is pretty silent inside as well. You can't really really hear a great deal more than you can hear with the Mini. But yeah, just to demonstrate, we're going to probably hit a few rougher bits of road on here, although it looks like they've been resurfacing. I'm impressed at how comfortable this car rides, considering it is a small hatchback on low profile tyres. Coming into national speed limit for it. Oh yeah, that's good. And it's over at 60. So, one thing again with the Regen Braking there is I'm kind of hitting 58, 60 mile an hour and I'm just lifting off the throttle, and before you know it, you've dropped to 50. You do kind of have to concentrate a little bit to hold your speed if you're driving in that kind of manner. Obviously, you may not drive like that all the time. That Regen Braking does kick in and it does want to slow you down. Whereas I know if I was in a petrol car here, I could lift off the throttle a little bit, and that's going to maintain my speed. Whereas this, look, you know, we're slowing, you know, and that's going to bring us to a standstill. So the day's still young. I've still got 69% battery, you know, and quite a few hours yet before I need to return this. But yeah, I'll be honest. I think if I was commuting still, doing the mileage I used to do, assuming that this had suitable range that I could get to work and back without needing to recharge, I think this would make a very nice daily driver. I'm not too sure I'd want to own it perhaps as my only car, but that's more because I'm a bit of a petrol head. You know, I have a variety of cars at my disposal. I do like a manual gearbox, I do like rear-wheel drive, and I do like a stonking engine with a soundtrack. And no matter how you slice it, an electric Mini is never going to fulfill any of those criteria. But this is a really nice car. Would I buy one? Yes, under the right circumstances I think I would. Although, if I'm being brutally honest, I would probably rather a convertible than a hardtop. I don't know if they're going to be making a convertible EV, one would assume so. And I think that would be my choice. Speed limit. Yeah, I'm not sure you would get tired of doing that. I think the more you get used to it, the less pokey it perhaps feels. Now, depending on your frame of reference of how quick your current car is that you drive. So my daily driver is actually a Suzuki Jimny, so it's not particularly quick, and to make it go, it's all about revs. It's got a 1.5 naturally aspirated engine, and you kind of need to make it sing around 6,000 RPM to make it go. Yeah, this is quite nice. I can kind of get used to something like this. I think for me the big question is, will the infrastructure ever really be there for electric cars, or is it just going to be a passing fad? There's lots of people who park on the street, so unless you're going to provide a charge point for every car, which there's way too many, I don't see how you can enable people to be able to charge their cars. It's fine if you've got a driveway and off-road parking, maybe if your work's got a charge point as well, but obviously, you know, if you can perhaps get 50 cars in your work car park, 200 cars, if they're all electric, you're going to need enough charge points for everybody, else you're just going to be shuffling cars around the whole day in the car park. So I think there are still some real big question marks on the viability of pure electric, you know, and whether you can actually live with it. And I know some people can. and I probably fall into that category where I'm not quite undecided. I don't really have the best off-road parking, and if I was going to go into the office, it would be unlikely I'd be able to charge the car there. So I kind of need something that can do a there and back journey. You know, and if I was to go away, you know, I quite like visiting peaks, lakes, North Wales. Maybe pop down to Devon, Cornwall way. I don't really want to be planning a journey around charging stops. You know, there's no denying in a petrol car, you can just pull in, fill the car up, you know, use it as an opportunity to perhaps have a toilet break, buy a bottle of water. You know, the actual filling of the car takes no time in comparison. Even rapid charging electric cars, you're still talking a considerable amount of minutes or hours, and you need to plan where you're actually going to go to be able to do that. So we're now down to 66% battery, and I think I've only done about 19 miles from 88% to 66%, which kind of feels like a big chunk of battery for a very small distance covered. You know, I need to check up on the website. I think they were claiming something like 150 or 180 mile range, which sounded kind of low. You know, I'd expect a petrol one of these to be doing easy sort of 200-300 miles on a tank. And again, I wouldn't say I'm driving this particularly hard. You know, I think if you were going to go and enjoy the Welsh mountains, drive around Snowdonia, and some of those bits, as a car enthusiast, you'd probably drive a lot harder than I have been. You know, I've spent quite a lot of time at below 30 mile an hour in 30 zones and 40 zones. You know, and we've not gone above 60 mile an hour anywhere. Right, national speed limit again. Floor it, oh, pulling left, right. Speed limit. So hold it at 60. Bit of an undulating bumpy road this, mini seems to be soaking up quite well so far. I mean, it is quite a small car, so the ride is a little bit jittery. You know, if you've got a long wheelbase saloon car, they're going to ride a bit better along here, most likely. So we're going to come down the hill here. We've got a right hand, we're going to go into a left hand sweeper, a short straight into a tight right hander, short straight and then a tight left hander. So we'll see how the Mini goes coming down here. Again, we're keeping this nice and legal. Alright, so 58, 60. Coming down here. Downhill. Obviously, if this was a closed road in the rally section, you'd probably be pulling 100 mile an hour plus down here at the moment. But we're not. So just going to hang out a little bit wide. Going to look for our turning point. Going to clip that. Stay on the right side of the road. Coming through here. Coming up to a tight left now. And we just want to dip the wheel out so we can see around the corner. Oh, a little bit of push, but not much. We're coming out of there. Well, we're 55 mile an hour as we exit the corner. So no point flooring it because, you know, 60 is the limit. Yes, very confident, very capable, and kind of fun. I think sometimes, you know, slower cars, less capable cars can be more enjoyable. You know, I think if you're driving a classic Mini, you certainly wouldn't have the cornering speed, you certainly wouldn't have the punchy acceleration this has got. but it'd probably be more fun feeding them through that set of bends. But that isn't really a criticism of this car. I think that is just modern cars in general, that they are very quick and very capable, which kind of scares me sometimes, because it means that particularly bad drivers can make very rapid progress without realising that they are, and they can do it in very inappropriate locations. Like, it would take no effort and no thought at all to be doing 50 mile an hour through here, despite the fact it's a 30 limit, and I'm sure there are drivers that are bad enough that that's exactly what they would do. Right, we're at 30 again, floor it, bit of a swerve, and we're at 60, down to 63% battery now. I have to say I'm getting kind of concerned, mostly for the fact that I really do only have a 13 amp plug to charge this thing, which I imagine is an overnight charge. I don't have one of the charge cards, so I can't go and use one of the public charge points. How far will 63% get me? If I keep driving for the rest of the day and charge it overnight, will it have enough power to get it to the dealership to return it? Or will I be phoning them up saying it's run out of juice? I don't know. Again, full regen braking, no use of the brake pedal there. Right. It really does jiggle the steering wheel though. Right, so we've been on charge for about an hour and 3 and 4 minutes probably. Let's see what it's actually done. 52%. Okay, that's actually better than I thought. 6% in an hour. So what? I don't know if it would remain consistent, but you know, if we're charging 1% every 10 minutes, is that then? We can sort of work out how long that will take to charge up sort of from flat. So overnight it looks promising that, you know, we could get a full charge in this. Obviously 46 to 52% doesn't feel like a lot to go back out on the road. You feel like you'd eat through that 6% very quickly, having now sat for an hour. You know, if we were on a road trip, you'd certainly need something that charges a lot quicker. Interestingly, I can see while we're on the charge screen here, so it's still plugged in, it looks like that must be a range indication, 51 miles. So I assume it can tell you that while you're driving, but I'm yet to find that option. But that's quite interesting information. So, you know, at 46%, it was definitely less than 50 miles. So, you know, finger in the air calculations certainly weren't right there. And it's sort of suggesting only 101 mile total range. Yeah, I think this is going to be a problem for electric car ownership. I think, you know, obviously other cars, Teslas, I believe, have got bigger batteries and bigger ranges, and you know, the technology's still moving, but this mini model is quite new. You know, and if you want a car of this size, then clearly it's a 100-mile range. I think for me, as impressed as I am with the car, and I really am, the Mini as a whole and how the EV drives, I don't think I'd want to spend the money to buy a car that only did 100 miles before you need to fully recharge it or fill it up. That is a deal breaker. So it's the end of the day. Some final thoughts with the Mini Electric. We've managed to get about 4 hours worth of charging time in, all through a 13 amp plug, but we are, sadly to say, down to 30% battery and an indicated 30-mile range. I have to say, it has surpassed expectations. I've really liked driving it. You know, no car's ever going to be perfect, but I really don't have any complaints with this, apart from the fact that the range is absolutely rubbish. It's a shame, you know. I think it just shows that the technology isn't quite there yet. You know, 100-mile range, even today, it's like I've plugged it in 3 times to try and charge it. When I have stopped, it kind of feels like you're always needing to plug it in, and I think that would really irritate me as an ownership prospect. You know, I think if it could do 200 miles being driven the way I drive it, you know, that would be quite usable. I could live with that. But 100 miles, that's just too short. You know, I'm standing here in sort of the Bedfordshire, Buckinghamshire border. If I wanted to go and drive to some of my favourite roads in North Wales, there's a little cafe on top of the Horseshoe Pass called the Ponderosa. If I had 100% charge, I couldn't get there. And for me, that is a deal breaker, that I just don't think it is practical enough to really use. I think, you know, if you're the kind of person who perhaps doesn't even do 50 miles in a week, then yes, obviously it's got enough range for you, but then you're probably not really that interested in cars or driving. For me, it is that balance of charge time versus... So it's the end of the day. Even my phone battery now is complaining at me, as I haven't had this on charge all day. But unlike the car, it hasn't had to spend 4 hours being charged up. It has done the whole day, but it's now finally saying, give me a rest. I have to add a bit of illumination from an LED torch instead. I'll be sad to take this back tomorrow, but it kind of makes me want to think, what does the petrol Cooper S go like? Will that give me better range and actually comparable performance? It'd be very interesting to know. I shall have to speak to the dealer and see about perhaps having a test drive of a modern Cooper S automatic as a comparison. Obviously people are going to be concerned about emissions. That's up to you on where you stand on that. I think we all have our own beliefs on that. For me, emissions wouldn't be the reason for buying an electric car. But yeah, I've enjoyed this, but you know, maybe it's a few years off yet before these are really going to be usable for a wider populace, shall we say. So the final update, I'm back in the Mini, just about to drop it back off at the dealership. It's been on charge overnight. It's only 8:30 in the morning, so you know, if you're going on a commute, you'd probably need to leave a bit earlier. But we have got up to 91% charge with an overnight. Sorry, 91% battery. Rapidly dropped to 90% from charging overnight, and it was on 15%, I think, when I parked it up. So yeah, not 100%. You know, and if you're leaving an hour earlier, then obviously, you know, your power's going to be less as well. Doable perhaps, as long as you charge it every night. But you know, I think my sentiments have been clear. I've enjoyed the car, I like how it goes, but at the moment the run time versus the charge time just isn't quite there for me. But we'll see. It's looking promising.